Welcome back, true believers and all you merry Marvelites, to another very interesting episode of Marvel's Avengers 101. Now, to get right to the point of this video, there was indeed a lot of recent news revealed directly from Square Enix going over all of the official accessibility options that will indeed be implemented within Marvel's Avengers come launch. Now, we were already aware that this information was going to be provided to us sometime this week, given their previous update that they did provide to us last week. And even though that small 1-minute update video showcasing some bits of new gameplay and saying that they are going to have an entire live stream event on June 24th was very entertaining to say the least, that still did not cover the primary accessibility features that are going to be included within the Avengers project. But thanks to this recent article that Square Enix has written down, there is a lot of information which I do think that people with disabilities out there might find interesting, as well as some bits of new information that do revolve around the entire game as a whole. And while I'm not going to read the entirety of this article, I'm just going to point out the main highlights that it does indeed feature that do include the most important tidbits of information that we will expect within the game. So coming directly from Square Enix's website, accessibility on Marvel's Avengers. The journey so far. Megan Marie and Mariah Robinson from Crystal Dynamics talk about accessibility and inclusion in the upcoming game. And with a pretty intriguing statement right off the bat, Square Enix does state, the team is hard at work at making the game broadly accessible, as well as the surrounding marketing activities. I recently spoke with Megan Marie, Senior Community and Social Media Manager, and Mariah Robinson, Game Designer, two of the passionate advocates for accessibility at Crystal Dynamics, to discuss the accessibility mandate on Marvel's Avengers in a candid and transparent manner. While we can't yet share all details about the options that will be available at launch, we still wanted to share that discussion with the community. And to quote Megan Marie herself, she goes on to say, our accessibility initiatives at the studio started with a quote-unquote rogue group of passionate allies, who were advocating and making efforts in their own work as far back as the 2013 Tomb Raider reboot. That resulted in some great initiatives, but momentum really began when we formalized into a team with a dedicated producer and started to centralize our efforts. For Marvel's Avengers, we leaned heavily on industry experts. For example, we brought in accessibility specialist Cherry Thompson for early feedback on our game. Cherry also presented a poignant talk to the studio, which I think helped those less familiar with accessibility initiatives understand the large impact their efforts have on a wide scope of people. Colleagues beyond our team of accessibility allies really started to become involved after that. And just make sure that all of you keep Cherry's name in mind, because she is actually pretty important to the overall message that this article holds. But to continue on, we do have a quote coming from Mariah Robinson herself, and she goes on to say, after learning more about them, I started to become even more involved and challenge myself by doing presentations, by myself and with people. Public speaking is not my area of comfort at all, but this was too important. One of the coolest points for others in the studio was when we started mocapping people with disabilities for Marvel's Avengers. Since this wasn't something that we had done before, it was wonderful to see a different perspective through other devs. We all learned a lot during that process. And when discussing the specific subject matter within the realm of disabilities with that of diversity and representation, Megan then went on by providing a very interesting answer by stating our goal is to normalize representation within our game world by reflecting the diversity of the real world. We have scenes in the game like A-Day, which is essentially a comic book convention. Having representation in a crowd of people who are all there sharing a passion for superheroes is important to us. Cherry even did some baseline motion capture for us in their wheelchair to help idle movements feel more organic, a true first for Crystal. And this is where we get into one of the most interesting pieces of news within this article, because we do have a brand new character that will be featured within the game as a whole, simply titled Cerise. And while the article does indicate that Cerise is nothing more than an NPC and human character that we will be able to interact with throughout certain points of the game's narrative, it is pretty cool nonetheless to see that type of representation within the game, whether it is big or small. Now, one big factor that I do see some people trying to point out here is that there is actually an inhuman character called Cerise within the world of the Marvel Universe in the realm of the comic books. So even though some people out there are thinking that we'll be able to actually play as Cerise as one of the optional Avengers within the game, Cherry actually went on Twitter clarifying otherwise. And within In this small thread, Cherry simply stated, P.S. She's called Cerise, which is cherry in French. And to follow up, which is detailed within the blog post itself, Cerise is an NPC and I provided idle animations for. I think she's so cool. I can't wait to meet her myself and for everyone to learn her story as they discover her. I did the mocap while I was in studio collaborating on accessibility. And alongside of this, we already know that the main characters that we will be able to play as at launch is the main 6 that we've already seen thus far, with that of Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, Black Widow, Hulk, and Ms. Marvel. So even though Cerise is simply that of a side character that we will be able to interact with, I'm still curious to see what type of narrative she will have in the overall story. And to continue on the article with a quote from Maria, she goes on to state, we have been working on a variety of ways to represent diversity. We see all kinds of people in our society, so why not reflect that in our in-game world? We tell the story of characters finding their way through hardship, tragedy, transformation, and searching for self-identification. In the end, it's a story about people. Now, don't get me wrong, even though I am personally very interested to learn more about the overall narrative that this game will feature, I'm still a bit worried that they might just go a bit too political with some of the narrative aspects that they might feature down the line. So hopefully the final product of this game's story will simply feature all the characters in all their glory and focus on what makes them so special. But if they end up including something that feels a bit too forced, I'm not sure exactly how I will end up feeling about that. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see until the game releases so we can find out for ourselves. Furthermore, accessibility is an ongoing pursuit, not a finite goal. This is a very ambitious game for us, and so we plan to continue addressing our accessibility ambitions and rolling out improvements ongoing beyond launch. The advocacy of accessibility was always there, but now that we have a formalized team, we're better equipped for the future. And as Square Enix persists, our accessibility team is very aware of the challenges we faced on this project. But with that knowledge, we will be better equipped for that journey to continue. We've learned so much in the last few years, so this is just the beginning. We really hope that the message that we're sending out to our community with these features is not only are we listening, but that we are doing. And as we draw closer to the finish line of this article, we do have some information which directly relates to certain gameplay elements that we can expect within the final game. As the question asks, can you give a few examples of accessibility features that will be in the game? And as Megan replies, ultimately, we really want to have as many options as possible so that people can customize their experience to fit their playstyle, abilities, environment, and all those factors that may change over time. One of the examples I am most excited about is a high contrast user interface. The high contrast UI feature makes it easier to navigate for low vision users or people who find some interfaces distracting and difficult to use. The UI team really did a great job on that one. And with Mariah's additional quote, we have lots of incredible features lined up for Marvel's Avengers. Fully remappable controls, character associated subtitles, campaign-relevant closed captions, and harm training rooms, just to name a few. We're always looking into more options and features that will help make our game more accessible. We will share many more details in the near future. And for those of you who are unaware, the harm training rooms are essentially ways so that way you can practice your new superhero abilities once you do upgrade each individual Avenger. So seeing that Crystal Dynamics is trying to make those specific types of challenge areas more accessible for people with disabilities is just a very cool thing to see. But to end this article with a very intriguing question, it does state, is there anything else you want to say to the community? And as both Megan and Mariah go on to state, a big thing for us is to get the community involved in the discussion surrounding accessibility. We don't expect to be perfect at launch, but we really want to involve the community post-launch so that they can share feedback and suggestions that fit the needs of our player base. We want to improve the game every chance we get. Accessibility on Marvel's Avengers is a journey we intend on continuing. We've already set up our accessibility email alias, accessibility@crystald.com, so we're ready for feedback. And with the final line from Mariah herself, she goes on to say, I don't know if I can follow that. But yes, I have a personal journey with accessibility, and it is my personal mission to include everybody in my life and in my work. The game has a tagline that helps define a message of how important inclusiveness is. Embrace your powers. We really do believe that everyone can be a superhero, and with Marvel's Avengers, we want them to live that superhero fantasy. So in the end everyone, while this article could have included a bit more information on certain aspects of the game, you still have to give Square Enix props for trying their best to include as many options as possible for people with disabilities to play this game. And as I stated within one of my previous videos, it turns out that Spider-Man PS4 was listed as one of the most accessible games that you can play throughout this entire generation. So seeing that Marvel's Avengers is trying to follow suit within that game's footsteps is just very admirable to say the least. And while I know that we're all still waiting for the official news to drop of this game on June 24th during their live stream event, I'm still crossing my fingers that we could potentially end up receiving more information within slight updates like these about the game as we draw closer to that date. But no matter what happens, fingers crossed that the final game will in fact be worth the wait. But with all that said everyone, that's the video I have for you today, and please let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. What do you think about this information on Square Enix's efforts to fully try and push the ways of accessibility options for people to play their games, and which option are you looking forward to the most out of the entirety of this game? For me personally, I'm still very curious to learn more about the harm room and seeing how they could try and apply that aspect of the game for people with disabilities. And even though I still have a few doubts about the current progress of this game as of right now, I'm still crossing my fingers and hoping for the absolute best outcome. But until the next news update everyone, thank you all so much for watching, stay merry Marvelites, and peace out.
Good isn't a thing you are. It's a thing you do.